You're listening to Psych with Mike. And remember, the book, Psych with Mike and Brett, A User's Guide to Being Human, has a ton more information in it that is corollary to the things that we talk about here on Psych with Mike. So pick up a copy and leave us a review on Amazon. That is super helpful. Subscribe to Psych with Mike on YouTube and on Apple Podcasts, and leave us a review on Apple if you would like, and that really helps out the show. And now, here's Psych with Mike. Welcome into the Psych with Mike library. I am your host, Dr. Michael Mahan, and if you enjoy this content, then please buy the book, Psych with Mike and Brett, A User's Guide to Being Human. Links are in the description below. You can also subscribe to the podcast on YouTube and on Apple Podcasts. You can leave us a review on Apple, and that would be fantastic. Also, if you buy the book from the link below, or any link at all, just buy the book, please leave us a review on Amazon. That really helps. So there's a lot of science in today's episode. I apologize for that. I don't really apologize for that, but I think that it's important to understand the science, because what I'm going to present is what I think is a persuasive argument that I'm hoping is going to make you think about what you believe about emotional regulation in a different way. So to start off, let's talk about some of the automatic thoughts that you might have in your brain. For example, big boys don't ... cry. Fear is a sign of ... weakness. My guess is that everybody who is viewing this knew the answers to those questions before I said the answers. And the reason is I've been doing psychotherapy and teaching psychology for a long time, and I've never had anybody ever answer those questions differently. So are those ideas a part of the zeitgeist of our psyche? And the answer is unilaterally, unequivocally, no. Those are not pre-programmed into your DNA. Those are social constructs that have been engendered into you by years and years of social engineering. So why is it that we have these ideas that big boys don't cry and fear is a sign of weakness? I can't really answer why those ideas came from the long ago. My guess is that because those emotions made people feel uncomfortable, the idea was that they must be bad. But are they bad? The answer is obviously no, they're not bad. And as a matter of fact, my argument today is that sadness is actually the healthiest of all the human emotions. And my hope is that by the time you finish watching this show, that you will, if not agree with me, at least accept that the science that I'm going to present is persuasive, and that hopefully maybe you will think about it even in your subconscious, even if it doesn't make it into your conscious awareness. If it just percolates in your subconscious, maybe it will lead to some deeper understanding and change later on in life. So where are we going to start? Well, we're going to start with your nervous system. You may know that you have nerves in your body. My guess is that you do know that. And you may know that those nerves are conducting electrical signals, and that they create everything that is your brain and everything your brain knows, and all of your ability to move in your environment, to regulate your own temperature, to have memories. All of these things are happening in the nervous system. And as you can see from the card that is on the screen, your nervous system is divided into two main groups. So the central nervous system, which is your brain and your spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system, which is everything else. So your peripheral nervous system is divided into two categories, the autonomic and the somatic. So the somatic takes care of getting information from your sensory organs, so from your eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, and conducting the messages back to your appendages to move and to, operate whatever you're going to do, pick up a glass, whatever. Those are all handled in the somatic branch of the central nervous system or of the peripheral nervous system. Then the autonomic branch of the peripheral nervous system handles all of your automatic responses. And that is your heart beating, your lungs pumping, all of those things are handled in a way that you don't have to think about through the autonomic nervous system. And as a matter of fact, if you've ever actually tried to think about breathing, you know that after a while that kind of starts to get a little bit anxiety inducing, because then you're afraid that if you stop thinking about it, that you'll stop breathing. And that's not true. Obviously, if you stop thinking about breathing, your lungs will continue to pump because those functions are handled through the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is divided into two branches. You have the sympathetic, which is responsible for arousal. So there's a guy back in the day named Hans Selye who talked about the general adaptive syndrome, which I talk about extensively in the book. And basically that is our stress response. And the stress response directly is the result of the stimulation of the somatic nervous system. And it does things like causes the HPA axis to be active, so the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, which results into the deployment of cortisol and adrenaline into your system, which hypes you up. So that is the function of your fight or flight response. Both of those functions, fight and flight, are handled through the stimulation of the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. It gives you the ability to stand your ground and defend yourself if you need to, or to run away if that would be the appropriate course of action. Now, the parasympathetic branch is the branch of your nervous system, your autonomic nervous system, that returns you to homeostasis. So what does that mean? Well, after I have been stimulated, after my sympathetic branch of my nervous system has been stimulated, I'm in overdrive. And if you've ever heard the term hypervigilance or you've heard the term adrenal fatigue, these are different things that we say that denotes some elevated sense of alertness, some elevated sense of vigilance. That is through the operation of the sympathetic nervous system. Imagine if you're living in a place where bombs are dropping around you, you are going to be stimulated. Your sympathetic nervous system is going to be stimulated 24/7 because you're going to be in a constant state of hyperarousal. Anybody who's been in a state of hyperarousal for any sustained period of time knows that eventually you run out of those hormones that are driving that response, so adrenaline and cortisol. And when that happens, you don't feel very good. You feel pretty rotten. And in extreme cases, you can even run out of the molecule ATP, which is the fuel molecule for your cells. And when that happens, you drop. You just can't function anymore. So in extreme cases of hyperarousal, people may actually collapse, and that is because they've run out of adrenaline, cortisol, and ATP, and their bodies need to return to homeostasis. So how do I return to homeostasis? Well, I have to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. So the parasympathetic nervous system is the part of our nervous system, autonomic nervous system, that returns us to homeostasis. So it's also been called the rest and digest part of the autonomic nervous system because it returns the human body to homeostasis. So here's the biggest shocker that I think we need to really be aware of. all of our emotions run through either the sympathetic or the parasympathetic nervous system. So fear and anger are both those sides of the coin, fight or flight. So anger is fight, fear is flight, and those things are both sides of the same coin, the fight or flight response, which we know can only operate through the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. When we think about happiness, happiness is actually the only emotion that is a hybrid. So happiness requires activation of both the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. So the kind of excitement that you feel on Christmas Eve is activation of the sympathetic nervous system. So excitement, riding a roller coaster, is activation of the sympathetic nervous system. But joy, awe, is activation of the parasympathetic nervous system. So happiness can operate through both of those branches of the nervous system. Sadness is the only human emotion that can only operate through the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. Sadness's only function in human beings is to return us to a state of homeostasis. So if homeostasis is, and I would argue that it should be, the goal of all of our behavior or the goal of our emotions, then sadness clearly is the healthiest of all human emotions, because it is the only emotion that can operate exclusively through the parasympathetic nervous system. In addition to that, tears come in three kinds. So you have basal tears, which are the tears that just are in your eye to keep them lubricated so that they don't dry out and shrivel up like prunes and fall out of your melon. And then reflexive tears are the kind of tears that happen when you get a little piece of dust in your eye and your eyes water to flush that out. That's a reflexive tear. Emotional tears are the result of hormonal releases in our body that have caused emotions. And as far as we know, human beings are the only animals that have access to emotional tears. And I don't want to say that exclusively, because somebody will write me and say, hey, this type of monkey has been demonstrated to have emotional tears. And if that's true, that's great. Good on that monkey, because that shows an elevation to a higher state of homeostasis, which I think is fantastic. But human beings have emotional tears, and emotional tears are composed primarily of stress-related hormones, the number one of which is prolactin. So when you cry, you functionally cry out your stress. So the reason that human beings have developed the capacity of emotional tears is another step in the return to homeostasis. So sadness, its only function is to return us to homeostasis, which is why you can get sad in any extreme case. You can get sad when you get super happy. You can get sad when you get super scared. You can get sad, even have tears, when you get super angry. I'm so happy that I could cry. The reason is because we are in an extreme presentation, and our body's natural response, even when it's a good thing, like being too happy, our body's response to that is to return us to homeostasis. And our body's quickest, most efficient way of doing that is through tears, through sadness. It's like the great poets from the Flaming Lips told us in the song, "Do You Realize?" Happiness makes you cry. And that's why sadness is the healthiest of all human emotions. If you like this kind of content, leave me a comment. Please, please, please remember to buy the book, subscribe to the podcast, and as always, the music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue, and if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.